The family mansion in Hilford Town stood on a hill, overlooking rows of brown rooftops and dusty roads. The compound, once alive with children's laughter, now felt heavy with silence. Alice stepped out of a sleek car, her heels clicking against the gravel path. She had ignored her father Peter's calls for weeks, but now she was here. Life in Cedarfield City, where she worked as a financial analyst, had given her distance from the family drama. Yet, something about her father's sudden insistence on her return unsettled her spirit. Her phone buzzed with a new message as she walked toward the entrance. It was an email from her father. "You cannot avoid this anymore. The family assets must be decided." She frowned, her chest tightening. Assets. Nobody had spoken of that before. Moments later, her mother Beatrice called, her voice almost pleading. "Alice, please come inside. Your father is determined, and Patience is already stirring trouble." The tremor in Beatrice's tone told Alice this was not just about property, it was about loyalty. Inside the sitting room the air was thick. Patience stood near the window, arms folded, her expression smug. "So, the city daughter finally arrives," she said. Her words dripped with mockery. Peter sat in his large wooden chair, a cane resting against his knee. Though age had weakened his body, his gaze still carried command. "Alice," he said firmly, "tomorrow Alexander the lawyer will read the documents. Both of you must hear my decisions together." His voice left no space for argument. Later that night, Alice moved silently down the corridor and overheard voices near the study. Beatrice's whispers cut through the darkness. "Patience, listen to me. You have always been here. You have always stood by us. You should inherit it all." Patience's laugh followed, soft but sharp. "Alice chose Cedarfield City over us. She doesn't belong here anymore." Alice froze, her heart pounding. So this was what they wanted, to erase her as though she had never existed. The next morning, Alexander arrived from Brookhaven District, his black briefcase gleaming under the morning sun. He greeted them with a measured smile before laying thick papers across the dining table. "We are here to settle the matter of Mr. Peter Emanuel's estate," he said with solemn authority. The room grew quiet. Alice sat upright. Patience leaned forward eagerly, and Beatrice clasped her hands tightly. Peter cleared his throat, his voice rasping but steady. "What I have built is not merely wealth. What happens after today will test this family more than you can imagine." Alexander adjusted his glasses and began reading slowly. "This will concern land, properties, and savings built over 50 years. His voice echoed in the room. Patience leaned forward, her eyes hungry with expectation. Alice kept her hands folded in her lap, her face calm but her heart restless. Alexander continued, "The mansion in Hilford Town, along with the farmland behind it, shall pass into joint ownership of both daughters, Alice and Patience." Patience gasped, her lips tightening. "Joint ownership? That cannot be right." Peter raised a trembling hand to silence her. "It is what I have decided. One cannot grow while the other withers. You must find a way to build together." Patience's face flushed with anger. "Father, you know Alice left us. She chose Cedarfield City, her big job and her fancy life. I was here. I was the one taking care of you." Her voice shook the air. Alice met her sister's eyes steadily. "Patience, I left because there was no space for me here. That doesn't mean I stopped being part of this family." Alexander turned to the next page. "The financial accounts, however, shall not be divided equally. A large portion has been set aside for Alice to manage, under conditions of transparency. She will oversee the family's funds, including the farmland profits." A heavy silence fell. Beatrice's face darkened with disbelief. "Peter, how could you entrust her with money after she abandoned us? Patience has always been here." Peter's eyes burned with quiet resolve. "Because Alice understands numbers and discipline. She has built her life without leaning on anyone. That strength must now protect us all." Patience shot to her feet, her chair screeching against the tiled floor. "This is betrayal," she shouted. "You want me to bow to Alice?" "Never." Tears welled in her eyes, though her voice was sharp. Alice stood slowly, her voice calm but firm. "This is not about bowing, Patience. It is about responsibility. Father has trusted me with this, not to control you, but to ensure no one takes advantage of this family again." Patience scoffed. "Easy for you to say. You ran off, and now you come back as the hero." Peter struck his cane against the ground, the sound loud and final. "Enough. You two must understand. Wealth without unity is destruction. I have divided things this way because I want survival, not pride." His voice trembled but carried authority. "If you fail to work together, everything I built will scatter like dust." The room grew silent again, the only sound the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Alice sat down slowly, her mind turning. She knew this was only the beginning. The real test was not in the will, but in the choices that would follow. That evening, after Alexander left, the mansion was filled with unease. Patience refused to eat dinner, slamming her spoon against the table. Beatrice tried to comfort her, whispering, "Do not worry. We will find a way to turn things in your favor." Alice sat quietly, her mind heavy with thoughts. She knew her father's decision would create cracks wider than the gates outside. But beneath her calmness, she also felt a spark of responsibility, a sense that maybe, for the first time, she had been seen for who she truly was. Later that night, Alice walked into the backyard where the farmland stretched under the moonlight. The soil was dry, cracks cutting across its surface. She knelt, brushing her fingers over the earth. "This land holds stories," she whispered to herself. Behind her, Peter's voice emerged softly. "It also holds debts." Alice turned quickly. Her father stood there, leaning on his cane. His eyes looked tired but honest. "I took loans against this land. If the crops fail, everything goes with it." Alice's heart sank. The inheritance was not wealth. It was a burden. The next morning, Patience cornered Alice near the stairwell. "Do not pretend you care about this family," she hissed. "You will use this land for your own gain." Alice shook her head. "Patience, I have no interest in taking what belongs to both of us. But I will not allow foolishness to destroy everything." Patience's eyes narrowed. "We shall see." She walked away, her heels striking the tiles with anger. Alice knew then that her sister's bitterness would not fade easily. At breakfast, Alexander returned with more papers. "There is another matter," he said, placing documents on the table. "The property in Kingsville Market belongs to the family, but it has been losing value. Mr. Peter wanted both daughters to decide its future together." Patience's lips curled. "Sell it. We need the money now." Alice studied the papers, her brow furrowed. "If we sell in a rush, we will lose most of its worth. We must restructure it, rent it to merchants, and let it grow again." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. "Always the clever talker. You think life is just numbers and strategies." Peter raised his hand for silence. "Alice is right," he said firmly. "That property can sustain us if managed well. Quick money is like smoke. It vanishes before you taste it." Patience groaned in frustration. "So you trust her with everything. What about me?" Peter's voice grew heavy. "You will work with her. Unity is your only chance." The words felt like a verdict. That night, Alice sat alone in her old bedroom, staring at the faded curtains and cracked walls. Memories returned. Her childhood spent unnoticed, every achievement buried under her sister's spotlight. She had once promised herself never to come back. Yet here she was, chosen as the steward of a fragile legacy. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is not about recognition. Maybe this is about healing." Outside, the crickets sang as if echoing her thoughts. Meanwhile, Patience stormed into Beatrice's room. "Mother, you must help me. Father is blinded by Alice. If this continues, she will take everything." Beatrice's eyes narrowed with determination. Do not worry. There are ways to bend the law. If Alexander believes Alice should lead, then we must find someone else who can challenge him. People in Hilford town still respect my word. Patience smiled faintly, comforted by her mother's scheming. The battle lines were being drawn. The following day, Alexander requested both sisters to meet him at the town council office in Hilford. Your father wants me to ensure there is a plan, he explained. As they sat in the wooden chamber, Alice unfolded charts and calculations. If we reinvest profits from the farmland into the Kingsville property, we can restore value. Patience rolled her eyes. Always talking like a banker. What about my role? Alice looked at her firmly. Your role is to work with me, not against me. The words hung heavy in the air. After the meeting, Peter walked slowly toward the garden with Alice. Your sister does not see it yet, but one day she will understand, he said softly. Alice frowned. And if she never understands? Peter sighed deeply. Then you must still do the right thing. Leadership is not about being loved. It is about holding firm when storms come. Alice felt the words settle inside her like seeds waiting to grow. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills of Hilford town, Alice sat on the veranda watching the orange glow spread across the land. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. Patience and Beatrice would resist her at every turn. But for the first time in her life she felt grounded, not as the invisible child, but as a woman trusted with responsibility. This is only the beginning, she whispered to herself. The evening breeze carried her words, as if the land itself was listening. The next morning, Hilford town was buzzing with whispers. News of the Emanuel family's inheritance dispute had spread beyond the compound walls. At the town square, elders shook their heads. A house divided cannot stand, one said. Alice walked through the market, feeling eyes follow her. Some merchants nodded with respect. She was known for her success in Cedarfield City. Others muttered, she abandoned us before. Why should she return as leader now? Alice lifted her chin, determined not to let gossip weaken her resolve. Back at the mansion, Patience confronted Alice openly. You may have father's blessing, but you do not have mine, she declared. Beatrice stood at her daughter's side, her eyes sharp with defiance. We will not be ruled by you. Alice took a deep breath. This is not about ruling. It is about saving what we have left. If we waste time fighting, the debts will consume us all. Patience crossed her arms. Maybe that is your problem to solve, not mine. Her words echoed like poison in the hall. That evening, Alexander returned with grim news. I discovered additional documents, he said, placing them on the table. The farmland is not the only property tied to loans. The Kingsville market complex was also mortgaged. If payments are missed, the bank will seize it. Beatrice gasped. Peter, is this true? Peter lowered his gaze. Yes, I took risks, believing the land and market would provide returns. But the droughts and empty stalls have left us weak. Silence fell heavy. The inheritance everyone fought over was not riches. It was survival. Patience's anger boiled over. So this is what we are fighting for. Empty promises and debts. She turned on Alice. You knew, didn't you? That's why you were so eager to control everything. Alice shook her head. I only discovered it yesterday. But blaming will not change the truth. We must act, and quickly. Patience's lips curled in mockery. Always the clever planner. Always pretending to know best. Let us see if your numbers can feed us when the creditors come. Late into the night, Alice spread papers across her desk. Charts, repayment schedules, projected harvests, all lined with red ink. Her mind raced. If the farmland could be revived with irrigation, profits might cover the debts. But that required cooperation. As she worked, a soft knock came. It was Peter, leaning heavily on his cane. You are carrying too much, he said gently. Alice looked up, eyes tired. Father, you placed this weight on me. He sighed. Not because you are my favorite. Because you are strong enough to bear it. Meanwhile, in Beatrice's room, the scheming deepened. She sat with patience, her voice cold. If Alice takes control, she will shame us. The townspeople will believe we were failures who depended on her city wisdom. We cannot allow that. Patience clenched her fists. What do we do? Beatrice's eyes narrowed. We find allies. There are elders in Hilford who dislike outsiders. They will side with us if we convince them Alice has no right to lead. Their plot grew like shadows in the night. The following day, Alice gathered villagers at the farmland. Look at this soil, she said, lifting a handful of dry earth. It can live again with irrigation and proper care. We can grow yams, maize, and cassava strong enough to feed Hilford and pay the debts. Some nodded, impressed by her vision. But Patience interrupted loudly. Do not be deceived. She speaks like a stranger who abandoned us for Cedarfield City. Will you now trust her to save what she once despised? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alice's heart tightened, but she stood firm. Alexander stepped forward. Listen carefully. I've seen her plans. They are practical, not fantasies. If we ignore them, the bank will take everything. Do you prefer strangers owning your land instead of your own blood? The crowd grew restless. Some shouted in support of Alice, others of Patience. Beatrice raised her hand dramatically. This is not about banks or crop. This is about respect. A daughter who left should not dictate to those who stayed. The crowd roared with divided voices, the unity of the town slipping away. That evening, Peter called his family into the parlor. His voice was weak but sharp. Enough. This is not about who stayed or who left. This is about survival. Alice has the skill. Patience has the loyalty. If you refuse to combine those strengths, the legacy will end with me. His words trembled like prophecy. Alice bowed her head respectfully. Father, I will try. But I cannot force Patience to walk with me. Patience looked away, her jaw tight, refusing to respond. The silence was louder than any argument. As night settled over Hilford town, Alice sat on the veranda, staring at the dim lights of the marketplace in the distance. She thought of Cedarfield City, where life was predictable, free of family battles. Yet something deep inside her told her she was meant to face this storm. She whispered to herself, perhaps this is the reason I returned. Not to claim wealth, but to prove that broken things can still be rebuilt. The wind carried her words into the darkness, as if the land itself was listening. The next morning, whispers filled Hilford. Rumors spread that Alice intended to sell the farmland to foreign investors. Villagers frowned as she passed, shaking their heads. She wants to take everything away, some muttered. Alice was stunned. She had never said such a thing. At once, she knew where the rumor had come from. Patience and Beatrice. Their influence was turning the town against her. She clenched her fists but kept silent. Fighting lies with anger, she knew, would only make her look guilty. At the weekly council meeting, Beatrice stood before the elders in her finest wrapper, her voice heavy with false sorrow. My daughter Alice has abandoned us before, and now she seeks to uproot us completely. She wants to bring strangers into Hilford. Gasps filled the hall. Alice rose calmly, clutching her notes. That is not true, she said firmly. I have never spoken of selling this land. I have drawn plans for irrigation to restore it. I can show you the figures. But the murmurs continued, doubt spreading like smoke. Patience stepped forward, her voice dripping with practiced pain. She calls herself a savior, but where was she when we suffered drought? Where was she when we struggled? She was in Cedarfield, eating fine bread while we drank Gary. The villagers muttered in agreement. Alice raised her head. I was building skills, Patience. Skills that can help us now. Do not twist my journey into betrayal. The council leader, Chief Moses, tapped his staff. This matter is serious. We will call another sitting to decide. After the meeting, Alexander approached Alice. You must be careful, he warned. They are not just fighting for land. They are fighting for pride. When pride blinds people, even the truth cannot be seen. Alice sighed. What should I do? Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. Do not defend yourself with only numbers. Show them with action. If the soil lives again, their doubts will die. His words planted courage in her heart. That evening, Peter called Alice to his room. His voice was weaker than before. Do not let their tongues discourage you, he said. I made mistakes with debts, yes, but I trust your wisdom. The land needs you. Tears pricked Alice's eyes, but she swallowed them. Father, I will not fail you. Even if patience refuses, I will begin the work. Peter squeezed her hand gently. Then you will carry this family, even if they do not see it yet. 2 days later, Alice hired laborers with her own savings. She purchased irrigation pipes and hired a water engineer from Brookhaven district. Villagers watched as trucks unloaded equipment at the farmland. Some whispered in doubt, others in awe. Patience stormed into the field, her voice sharp. So this is it. Using your Cedarfield money to make yourself Queen of Hilford. Alice wiped her brow calmly. No, Patience. This is not about me. It is about saving what is left. But Patience spat on the ground and walked away, her anger rising. Beatrice fanned the flames further. She went house to house, whispering to neighbors. See how Alice tries to buy loyalty with her city wealth. She thinks we are beggars. The word spread quickly, sowing division. By the time the irrigation system began to flow, half the town had already decided Alice was arrogant. Still, the water trickled into the dry soil, softening the ground. Tiny shoots began to push through. Alice knelt in the field, her fingers brushing the first green leaves. Life always finds a way, she whispered. When the council gathered again, Chief Moses asked, What progress has been made? Alice stood proudly. Come and see for yourselves. She led them to the farmland where new crops had begun to sprout. The elders bent down, touching the fresh leaves. Murmurs of surprise rose. The land is breathing again, one said. Yet Patience stood at the edge, her arms crossed. Do not be fooled. These small plants mean nothing. She is buying time to take everything from us. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, torn between evidence and accusation. That night, Beatrice and Patience met secretly with an elder named Jonas, a man who had long disliked Peter. Help us remove Alice from this inheritance, Beatrice urged. Convince the council that she is unfit. We will ensure you are rewarded. Jonas smirked. You do not need to convince me. I have never trusted city daughters. I will speak against her. Their plan was set. The following morning, Jonas spread fresh lies, that Alice had hidden documents to seize the land in her own name. Once again, suspicion poisoned the air. Alice sat on the veranda of the mansion, the weight of the storm pressing on her shoulders. From a distance, she could see the green shoots swaying gently in the breeze, proof of her labor. Yet inside the walls, her family conspired to break her. Alexander joined her quietly. This is not only a battle for land, he said softly. It is a battle for truth. Lies run fast, but truth runs farther. Alice looked up at the dark sky. Stars faint above Hilford town. Then I must keep running with the truth, she whispered. Her resolve deepened, even as the shadows of betrayal thickened around her. The council summoned the family once more. This time the hall was packed. Villagers filled every corner, whispering as Jonas stepped forward. Alice has tricked you, he declared. She has hidden papers to seize the farmland for herself. Gasps erupted. Alice rose, her voice steady. That is a lie. I have nothing to hide. She turned to Alexander. Show them the documents. Alexander opened his briefcase, revealing signed copies of Peter's will. Here are the only papers. Nothing has been altered. Jonas frowned but continued to sneer. Patience jumped in quickly. Even if the papers are true, she has already made herself ruler. Look at the laborers she hired. Look at the money she is spending. She is building a kingdom for herself, not for Hilford. Beatrice nodded firmly. Exactly. She sees us as poor villagers she must rescue. That is not leadership. That is pride. The crowd murmured in agreement. Alice felt her chest tighten, but she took a deep breath. If pride were my motive, I would never have returned. I came because my father asked me to save what he could not. Chief Moses lifted his staff. We will not decide by words alone. Let us see the land. If the crops thrive, then Alice speaks truth. If the crops fail, then her words are nothing but dust. The villagers agreed. A procession moved to the farmland, the sun burning high. Everyone's eyes fell on the wide field. To their surprise, rows of green sprouts stretched across the soil, healthier than they had been in years. Women bent down, touching the leaves with awe. This land is alive again, one whispered. Patience's face twisted with frustration. This means nothing. Plants can wither overnight. Alice knelt and held up a basket of harvested vegetables, small but fresh. These were grown with the new water system. This is only the beginning. If you give me time, Hilford will eat from this land again. A murmur of hope spread through the crowd. Yet Beatrice raised her hand once more. Do not forget. She left us. She only returns when it suits her. Some villagers nodded, torn between hope and suspicion. At that moment Peter struggled forward, leaning on his cane. His voice cracked but carried force. Enough. You speak of who left and who stayed, but you forget who sacrificed. Alice built herself without our help. She carries knowledge we never gave her. And now she offers it freely to save us. If you cannot see that, then it is your blindness, not hers. The villagers fell silent. Patience's mouth opened, but no words came. Alexander stepped beside Peter. The will is clear. The land belongs to both daughters, but management of the finances rests with Alice. If anyone doubts, let them challenge me in Brookhaven Court. The threat silenced even Jonas. He looked down, knowing legal battles would expose his lies. Alice stood tall, her shoulders squared. For the first time, she felt the weight of her father's trust transform into strength. Back at the mansion, the air was thick with defeat. Patience slammed her door, refusing to join the family meal. Beatrice sat stiffly, her eyes burning with quiet rage. Alice ate little, sensing their bitterness. Later she found her father resting, his breathing heavy. You stood for me today, she said softly. Peter smiled faintly. No, child. I stood for the truth. The rest is yours to carry. Days turned into weeks. The farmland blossomed under irrigation. Villagers returned to work the fields, grateful for Alice's leadership. Stalls at Kingsville Market began to fill again, bringing in income. Slowly the family's debts shrank. But the emotional wounds in the mansion remained open. Patience avoided Alice, her jealousy thick as ever. Beatrice rarely spoke except to criticize. Still, Alice pressed forward, determined not to let their resistance break her spirit. One afternoon, while reviewing accounts, Alice discovered records of additional debts Beatrice had secretly taken in Peter's name. Shock rippled through her. She confronted her mother that evening. Why would you do this? She demanded. Beatrice's eyes flashed. Because I refuse to let you carry all the power. If I lose, then we all lose together. Alice's heart broke. Her mother was willing to sink the entire family rather than allow her to succeed. Peter overheard the exchange and called them both to his bedside. His voice was weak but stern. Beatrice, your pride will destroy this house. And you, Patience, your envy will eat your soul. If you cannot learn to stand with Alice, then the Emmanuel name will turn to ash. Beatrice turned away, silent. Patience bit her lip, tears pooling in her eyes, though her stubbornness held her tongue. Not long after, Peter passed away quietly in his sleep. The house was filled with wailing, but beneath the cries, tension still lingered. At his burial, villagers spoke of his wisdom and flaws, of debts and legacy. Alice stood at the graveside, tears running down her face, whispering, "Rest, father. I will carry this burden." Patience stood apart, her face unreadable, her mother clinging to her arm like a shield. After the mourning, Alexander gathered the family once more. Peter's final wish was not simply the division of wealth, he said. It was unity. If you continue in division, even what has been saved will vanish. He handed each daughter a letter Peter had written. Alice's letter read, "Do not shrink anymore. Lead with courage, even if they hate you." Patience's letter read, "Do not let envy blind you. You are more than comparison." Tears slipped down Patience's cheek as she folded the paper. Weeks later, the first harvest came. Baskets of maize and cassava filled the compound. Villagers celebrated, singing songs of gratitude. Some approached Alice, bowing slightly. "You have restored Hilford's hope," they said. Patience watched quietly, the weight of her father's words still pressing on her heart. Beatrice, though silent, could no longer deny the results. Slowly, the town's respect for Alice grew stronger than the whispers of doubt. One evening, Patience approached Alice in the farmland. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "I do not know how to stop envying you. But I also cannot deny what you have done." Alice turned, her eyes gentle. "You do not have to be me, Patience. You only have to be you. The land needs both of us, your loyalty, my numbers. Together we can protect it." For the first time, Patience nodded, though hesitation lingered in her eyes. Months later, Hilford town thrived. The farmland produced abundantly. Kingsville Market bustled with life, and debts were nearly gone. Alice walked through the fields, the evening sun painting everything gold. For the first time she felt peace. Not because her family had fully embraced her, but because she had embraced herself. She whispered, "Strength is not always in being loved. Sometimes it is in standing firm, even when love is absent." The wind carried her words across the crops, as if Peter's spirit was listening. The legacy of Hilford had survived, not by wealth alone, but by truth, resilience, and the courage of one daughter who refused to disappear.